Welcome to Still Untitled. I'm Will. Adam
I'm Adam Savage.
is here. Norm's here. Let's talk today about Indiana Jones. Dr. Jones.
Dr. Jones. You know,
You mean Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes.
Are there any other Indiana Jones films?
I like the third one.
Yeah, I know. That's what everybody says. The third one, here's what I can say about the third one. It sucks less.
The second one scared the shit out of me as a
Second
young
one's
child.
terrifying.
I
Monkey
never
brains.
really liked the second one. The
Snakes.
roller coaster ride, the villain. The problem is the villain wasn't scary because he was so removed. He was
that's
sort
true.
of faceless. To me, the villains have to be scary to you on a visceral level. And the villain in the third one, not scary.
Well, Nazis are scary.
Nazis are scary, but you can't just rest on Nazis are scary. What's the name of the pig-faced dude from Raiders? Toph.
Toph. Yeah. With the hand.
He
he's
is
terrifying.
terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying.
I don't
He
like
wants to
people that
shake
wear
your
black
hand.
coats and hats as a
I
result
know
of him.
you will, Fräulein. Yeah, he's absolutely terrifying.
Well, but he was clearly channeling like great character actors from the 50s
Yes.
and 60s with that role.
Absolutely.
And you know, I don't think you could have done more of that without it getting really hammy and cheesy.
No, but you still have to have scary villains. I'm trying to think of Dennis Hopper's genuinely scary in Speed.
In everything.
Yes. Christopher Walken, always scary. Always
Christopher Lee.
Yeah.
Christopher Lee, right? So the villain in the second one, he's too much like an Incan god, right? He's just
Shaman,
way far
yeah.
away over there. And the rich white guy in the third one, not scary.
Yeah, I mean, but it was a callback, right? Because wasn't he from the beginning of the first movie of Raiders?
No.
It's not the guy who stole
don't-
the idol from him at the start of Raiders.
No. That's Alfred Molina.
Oh, right.
Oh no, you're thinking
no.
Belloc.
I'm thinking
You're
of Belloc.
It's not Belloc.
Oh, it's not Belloc. I thought it was Belloc.
And Belloc, you couldn't have made Raiders wouldn't have been as scary if Belloc was the only villain. You needed people who
absolutely.
were scarier than Belloc.
Well, Nazis definitely fit the bill as scarier than Belloc.
Oh, so here's the thing about Raiders. I'm always referring to Raiders as a perfect movie.
Okay.
And
I've heard you say that.
have a very specific definition for that. So I'm a big film buff. We're all film buffs, and we often talk as film buffs do. What's your top 10? What's your top 5?
Sure.
And one of the things I've discovered about film buffs is any film buff worth their salt has at least 30 movies in their top 5.
And you also asked the question is, is it you're talking about your favorite movies or the best movies?
Well,
Objective,
and so this
subjective.
actually, I have, I think, several categories. There's movies that are your favorites. Now, what is the definition of your favorite? So there's movies you consider to be just like I'm saying about Raiders, perfect movies. There are perfect movies. There's not a flaw in them. You wouldn't change a thing.
Something you can watch over and over again.
That's a different category.
That's a different category. See, okay.
Movies that you can watch over and over again aren't necessarily perfect movies. They're just really enjoyable. And they might not even be the best movies. So there's movies you can watch repeatedly. There's movies that you consider perfect. There's movies that are really important to you,
Mhm.
which is also could be very different. For instance, so one of the most important films for me is Brazil. It is a totally seminally vital film in my aesthetic and narrative makeup as a film lover and a lover of stories. Brazil plays heavily into the aesthetic that I had while making art and into what I love about doing certain kinds of special effects. That's why I love the Juno Brothers, City of Lost Children, and Delicatessen. And Brazil, I worked my first job as an adult was as a projectionist in the 8th Street Playhouse Theater in New York City, which is where the Rocky Horror Picture Show fad began. I know, those of you who grew up in New York, it actually began at the Waverly, but only after 6 months it moved to the 8th Street Playhouse, so I'm right. So buzz off.
Dibs.
Dibs. So the 8th Street, and it ran there for 30 years under the direction of Sal Piro, who you can see in the movie Fame. Right? That's all shot at the 8th Street Playhouse when they go see Rocky Horror. So for the year that I worked at the 8th Street Playhouse, we showed Brazil for 6 months.
That's a lot of Brazil to watch.
Which means I've sat through that movie in its entirety at least 100 times.
And you've seen new things every time.
Absolutely. I even got to sit down with Terry Gilliam at DragonCon about 3 years ago and talk a lot about Brazil and about the making of and other movies that he liked. And
So the I think the only version of Brazil I've ever seen was that one that came out on the Criterion discs that was the Terry Gilliam Ultimate Cut, whatever,
which is
not the theatrical version.
And it's slightly different than the US theatrical version.
Okay.
What you saw, I think, is the UK theatrical version, which ends not on clouds but on darkness.
Right.
And it includes if I'm not incorrect, a scene where Mr. Heltman comes onto the truck to tell Sam that he's mucked things up for good here.
Don't remember that, but I remember it was definitely a dark ending.
It is a dark ending. And I mean, obviously, Brazil not only is a really important movie and it's amazing, but the story of how it got released, which is Terry Gilliam's protracted nearly over a year-long battle with Sid Sheinberg from Universal about the release of the film, which included him sneaking it into a film festival and it winning.
So he stole a print and snuck it in?
Absolutely.
That's
At the
amazing.
same time as, if I remember correctly, if memory serves, Sid Sheinberg was cutting his own version of it, taking all the dailies and cutting a happy version of it, which I've actually seen because the very first time Brazil aired on television, they actually aired Universal's cut. And I can't remember. I think that cut might actually be in the Criterion.
It is, yeah.
It is. It's totally worth watching because it's amazing what you can do with the same footage.
I need to do that. Seems like a Monday thing. Watch the original,
Yes.
watch the happy, watch the dark.
Well, and the
Maybe
happy and
other
the
way
dark
around.
aren't that radically different. There's
Okay.
only a few key differences in them. But so I can't really watch Brazil anymore.
I can imagine.
I've used my lifetime allotment of viewings of Brazil. Not to say that it's not one of like the top 10 films in my existence.
But
they're
Raiders,
crossovers, so there are
Raiders-
movies that fit in both
So
multiple categories.
Raiders for me fits in almost every category. I can watch it repeatedly. From any point I start watching it, I'm wanting to get in. I know the movie by heart. I think structurally it's perfect. I think all the stuff that I find goofy and over the top about many of the other films, and I know that George and Stephen were referring to the Saturday morning serials with the goofy plot devices that are in those. They all have exactly the right amount of flavor in Raiders. And the performances, the acting is great. Marion, my God, Marion defines my perfect woman. My wife is actually, my wife is not that radically different than Marion. My best friend and I, David in New York, he gave me this great term. He said, the perfect woman is a girl you can throw the gun to. And Marion, and I would also add my wife, are women you can throw the gun to.
good to know.
Raiders is and so they're about to release it on Blu-ray.
Yes.
Right. So he shows weakness. He shows strength. He's clearly a kind of broken, flawed hero, right?
Well, and in that, I think Harrison Ford brings a very Spielberg and Lucas and Ford bring a very Chandler-esque hero's journey to the movie where he is the only guy you want in that pocket, in that zone in this movie. He is the, as Chandler would say, he's the best man in his world and he's a good enough man for any world, but he knows his flaws. He's not tarnished. He's not afraid. I mean, he's like a perfect hero. And I love that, it's amazing to me when you really think about it. Harrison Ford has played 3 of the most important heroes in film history, from Deckard in Blade Runner to Indiana Jones to Han Solo. I mean,
And didn't do shabby in the other 50 or 60 movies.
Yes, I know.
Let's
And
be
as
clear.
the president of the United States, also.
right.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to the Blu-ray. I'm really looking forward to seeing. And I saw an interview with Spielberg where he said, "Yeah, you know what? Raiders is one of my movies. I have nothing I want to change
He doesn't,
about
and
it.
it's one of these few movies he can watch over and over again as if the movie he made himself. Yeah.
It's great. It's great. I love the big German wanting to have the fist fight in front of the flying wing.
And it's a movie that,
oh, yeah.
in the making of, there's so many stories behind.
Yes.
And scenes that were there as accident, like the whip versus the gun scene. He was tired that day. So he wanted to shoot
He was
the gun.
sick. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also,
He had the flu.
it's not the age, it's the mileage. I believe that was ad lib.
that was an ad lib?
or a late addition to the script.
Well, in the cold open. I mean, that I could be wrong, but I think that was the first movie I ever saw that had that kind of an intense cold open pre-action movie action scene to kind of kick things off with a huge bang, and there was a giant ball that rolls through a cave and almost crushes. I mean, it's amazing.
And that has many precursors. So in Raiders, Spielberg and Lucas are completely referring to a whole canon of films that happened 30 years before we were born.
Mhm.
And all of those tropes of even big ball rolling and the guy wearing a fedora in the jungle, the whip on the belt. Each of these things are things they pulled from other movies, Alan Quatermain, and I mean, there's an endless list of movies and even shots that they pulled out Tarantino style to use in Raiders one after the other. But it all has this gestalt of just like
adventure.
I'm never going to get tired of that movie. I mean, even to the fact of like, really, he rode a periscope several hundred miles across the ocean.
But he could do that. He's a hero. It doesn't matter. It was the North. It doesn't matter.
Dots over a map.
Yeah.
Yes, and like, how does he know not to look at the thing?
Well,
Look at it, Marion.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite joke from the new Muppet movie. Was that we're going to travel by map? It's much faster than any other way you go.
And the face melting and the special effects and that.
Yeah, how did he know not to look at the thing?
I don't know.
It was from the Bible.
Well, yeah. And you guys ever read the Bible?
Yeah.
Movie is totally important to me. My first worn leather jacket, which I bought in high school and had like quilting on it, I still was thinking, oh, it's kind of like Raiders. And then when I was like 19 and I was in Venice, California with a friend of mine and I bought a weathered leather jacket. I mean, I've had a succession of beat up leather jackets and they all are referring to Harrison Ford's jacket.
Well, you could probably argue that any leather jacket sold in North America that's brown and weathered and is not a bomber jacket
is referring to
Harrison Ford's jacket.
Well, and
I mean, Gap built a whole industry on selling khakis. Let's be clear.
Exactly. We should note that, I think that I love his costume in those movies. I love his costumes. They were designed by Deborah Nadoolman, who's John Landis's wife, and did all of John's movies and several of Spielberg's. And that perfect mix of the kind of, I love that hat. She cut the hat on a special bias. I wear that hat. I have my daily
It's
hat.
established.
Yes, we've talked about this.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before, but I mean,
you can also go look at my talk this year at Maker Faire, which is I think on Fora TV.
It's on. TV. We have it.
It's
on Tested.
It's on Tested, right? The hat is a beautiful object. I was just cleaning. I cleaned mine this weekend.
How do you clean a beaver felt hat?
Well, the problem that I was having with it was not that it was, getting dirt on it, but that where I was always putting it on my head, it had built up enough grease to actually start to get shiny on its crown.
Okay.
And that's just kind of gross.
Yeah.
So I was in a hotel in Vegas because we were performing our Behind the Myths tour at the Palazzo in Vegas this weekend. And I used a hand towel, which I wet and scrubbed it until it got up the grease, and it now looks fine. What I did to the hand towel is really kind of wrong.
Oh, no.
And I left a note for housekeeping that said, I cleaned my hat with this, so it didn't look like I wiped my ass with a hand towel.
And just left it on the sink, yeah.
I figure as a cleaning lady or cleaning person in Vegas, you've probably seen things I don't ever want to think about.
Horrible
Good
things.
Disclaimer, I cleaned my hat.
Anytime we go to Vegas, I mean, we always go in with a whole bunch of computers and cameras and stuff. And I always wonder what they think when we're rolling into a hotel room with 5 camera bags and a bunch of lights and 6 dudes.
Right.
It's a real specific picture.
And of course, you made the bullwhip.
I made the bullwhip. Yes, I taught myself whip making back in 1990. What was it? Probably 1995. I decided to make a Raiders Bowl. Actually, so
camera changeover. We're back.
Camera changeover. We're back. So in 1995, I taught myself to make a whip with a book I bought at Tandy Leather called How to Make a Bullwhip. Now, the whip isn't that great. Doesn't look that great. But I kind of made some changes to the methodology that they described based on the way the leather was moving for me and some assumptions that I was making.
So you took a time-honored craft honed over the generations and then made a quick snap judgment to modify it.
It was a pamphlet. It was a pamphlet, and I didn't think that the leather was moving for me the way the pamphlet said it would, so I made some mods. I managed to figure out, and this is like, I guess this is pre-internet, 1995. I guess it was just
early.
I had internet, but it was barely.
CompuServe, probably, right?
Yeah.
Or
No.
AOL?
I was
Okay.
that was after I was on AOL. That was post AOL.
Okay.
For me. So I managed to figure out that the guy who made the whips for Raiders was named David Morgan up in Washington State, and I called him up and I managed to get him on the phone. and he talked to me for like 90 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And
Walk you through.
He walked me through how the whips were made, what their structure was, and it turned out that several of the modifications that I'd made were all standard modifications off the main way that people make whips. So I had gotten it actually right.
Intuitive whip making process.
Then he sent me. Well, I mean, I purchased it, but he picked out a kangaroo hide that matched the weight and feel of one from the movie, and I ended up making this really like ridiculously long
14-foot monster, right?
Yeah, it was like bigger than you'd ever make a bullwhip, but than anyone would ever want to make a bullwhip. But it's
Still
gorgeous.
crackable?
Still crackable. I mean, you need hearing protection. It's like a rifle shot.
Yeah.
So yeah, Raiders is it's so important. It's such a wonderful, vital, still.
Are there
fantastic
movies that
movie.
you think come close?
As far as adventure films?
Adventure films.
I mean,
like
or just other adventure films that are.
God, that's a good question. I mean,
The Man
nothing
Who
else.
Would Be King.
What's that?
The Man Who Would Be King.
Well, so you're looking for something that's in a similar genre, and I love The Man Who Would Be King, but it's a much more ponderous movie that doesn't crackle along like Raiders does. It's a great movie, no doubt, and I love it. But it's just, I think Raiders exists way out there alone on that kind of traveling around the world action adventure. I remember arguing with my cousin the summer Raiders came out, and he was like, "Well, Moonraker." It was the same summer as Moonraker.
Oh boy.
And he was like, "Moonraker is definitely the best movie I've seen all summer." And we were coming out of Raiders, and I was like, "Are you insane? Raiders is the best movie I have ever seen, and Moonraker doesn't even come close."
Moonraker they go to the moon, and there's guns, and there's an evil villain.
Love
Silly
in
sex
space.
jokes. It appears Mr. Bond's attempting re-entry, sir.
Yeah, okay, you win. That's a clear victory to Raiders. I mean, you could argue that stuff like Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, the kind of big screen CinemaScope, late 50s, I guess they were 50s and 60s. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Those are almost like they're paced almost like travelogues today. So that like the Raiders and Jaws, like you did with Jaws. It was the beginning of a whole new pace for that kind of
Kind of
action.
and maybe
adventure movie.
there's a whole film class to be worked out in here, because I mean, what Spielberg and Lucas were doing was they were mining their childhoods for a sense of excitement and adventure, and it's perfectly translated to the screen. They installed that sense of adventurous film into my childhood.
And all of us.
Yes.
Like,
yeah. And in the way Tarantino does
Right,
now.
right. Commenting on the history of film. So they're commenting on the history of film at the same time as they're contributing to it and altering its course.
Well, just pushing it's just modernizing. I mean, and you kind of look at that now. I mean, it's not just modernizing
Right.
is diminutive, but I mean, they're taking the tropes from the existing things that they love.
So, but I find myself wondering, if you look at the history of film, like you look at the war movie and you look at it from the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and you see how it changes according to the American, I'm talking about American films, American consciousness about war. So they get darker around the Vietnam War, but they're very gung-ho during the Second World War. They're slightly detached in between the two wars, and it's not really a subject that people want to go see about, right? So for that part of the 20th century, film is responding to the culture and things are altering. But round about the time Raiders comes out, the 70s is when filmmakers start making films that are commenting not only on the culture, but on film as a part of the culture. Right. So you get this meta commentary on it. And Tarantino to me is the pinnacle of that kind of form. And I know that he pisses off a lot of old time filmmakers because of that. Because they know all the shots that he is literally pulling out of film history and just plugging into his movies.
If you go watch Vanishing Point and Death Proof one after the other, then things become real clear.
Right. But at the same time, again, there's this gestalt of what the final product is, and it's wonderful. And I'm a huge Tarantino lover. I love everything he's done. I love Death Proof. I don't think it's too talky. I think
it's fantastic. Yeah.
I think much better than Planet Terror.
Yes, totally much better than Planet Terror.
Well, and Kurt Russell is. I mean, it's like top 3 Kurt Russell role for me, probably. Death Proof.
That's great. You know what I haven't seen, which I've been wanting to see recently? This total sidebar. Soldier, which I didn't realize. Soldier is actually written by David Peoples, who wrote Blade Runner.
I didn't know that.
And he considers Soldier to be set in the universe, pretty much in Blade Runner's universe, even though it's on another planet.
Ooh. Interesting.
And he plays a cyborg, right, finding his humanity. I've never seen it, but I've been wanting to see it because apparently Kurt Russell's performance in it is incredibly understated and terrific. I've also heard he's a genuinely great guy.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like he has to. I want to believe that.
Craig Ferguson has some lovely stories about Kurt Russell convincing him to get a pilot's license and then pushing him to get it. And, these apparently, they're good friends, and Kurt just sounds like a great guy.
Big Trouble in Little China. and all
Yes!
this stuff.
Yeah.
Silkwood. I grew up with
Escape
the
from New
computer
York.
who wore tennis shoes.
Oh,
I'm going all the way back.
it's deep cuts today. That'll do it for us this week. We will be back next week with another episode of Still Entitled. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Norm.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.